Over the past 4 years, one thing has made the biggest difference to my performance: mileage. But here's the catch. If you increase that mileage too quick, you'll end up injured, burnt out, and never able to reach your personal bests. So in this video today, I'm going to show you the 3 proven models for helping you safely increase your mileage so you can run your best. And these are the exact models that I've used myself in my training and with my clients to personally run an 18-minute 25K, a 40-minute 10K, and a 1-hour 30 half marathon, all whilst being 100 kilograms. Of course, that might not be impressive to some, but from going from 0 to being able to do this and having trialed all of these methods myself, I feel like I'm in a good place to be able to advise. If you're new around here, you can always subscribe. And if you look at the top link in my bio, there is a free 5K development program that will give you everything you need to reach that 5K personal best. So let's get stuck into it. So the first model is the most common model, and it is probably the simplest one you could follow. And that is the 10% rule. The concept with this one is simple, and the proof is in the name. You're going to increase your running mileage or volume by 10% per week. This is the one that's probably used the most and is a classic, and for good reason. So for example, if you start off in week 1 and you're running 20 kilometers, in week 2, you would progress that by 10%, quick maths, 22 kilometers. Then in week 3, you'd be up to 24 kilometers. Week 4, you'd be up to 26.5 kilometers, and so on, and so on. The benefits of the 10% rule are that it's really easy to follow. All you need to do is some basic calculations, and you know what you need to do in your next running week. It really does build consistency fast. You'll find yourself progressing pretty well because all you need to focus on is running a little bit more each week. Of course, as you get a more advanced runner, that increase will be greater than someone running 20K per week. Now for the negatives. In the thoroughbred purist model, there is no built-in recovery route, which can ultimately lead to injury and overtraining. And this is where the main flaw of this model comes in. It relies heavily on the individual doing the program to be able to auto-regulate their fatigue. And by that I mean, you need to have an understanding of what it feels like to be overtired, just about right tired, or not training hard enough. If you don't know about this, you're probably going to end up increasing your mileage 10% every week, and very quickly you'd end up in an absolute recovery pit, injured, no bueno. So that's model 1, that's the 10% rule. So now we have the model 2, and it's got a bit of a strange name, and that is the Jack Daniels method. So the Jack Daniels method is where you increase your mileage by the number of runs you do per week. You then hold that mileage for a couple weeks before then progressing it again. Sounds complicated, but let me explain. So for example, if you're running 3 times per week and you're currently running 20 kilometers per week, you would increase your mileage by 3 miles or roughly 5 kilometers. So let's say in week 1, you would run 20 kilometers as normal. You would then apply the Jack Daniels method and you would jump up to 25 kilometers for the next 3 weeks. Then you would increase your mileage again. So if you're still running 3 times per week, you would increase by 5 kilometers again and stick at that next goalpost. The benefits of this model compared to the 10% model is it gives your body time to adapt to that increase in volume. It can, of course, because of this, reduce the risk of injury because it has less aggressive progressions. In the 10% model, you're increasing every week. In this model, you're increasing every 3 weeks, and you've got time to solidify that mileage. The main pullbacks from this model is that it can seem like progress is a little bit slower. We all want to be able to run more, a lot faster. This model, you'll be stuck on the same mileage for 3 weeks minimum before you can progress again. So therefore, it requires a decent amount of patience for you to be able to complete this successfully, and may actually involve more planning when you start to add in more runs, for example, because then that increases your overall mileage increases. But once you've got your head around it, I don't think that's that much of an issue. And now we have my personal preferred model, and that is the 3-to-1 build and recover cycle. So in this model, you kind of look at the other 2 models, so the 10% and the Jack Daniels, you look at the negatives and you try and remove them through combining elements of each other and removing things that create the negatives. So for example, in the 3-to-1 model, you're trying to build your volume for 3 weeks, and then you will go into a recovery week. When you go into a recovery week, that recovery week will be the same mileage that you started that building phase. So for example, let's say in week 1, you did 20K. Week 2, you would do 22K. In week 3, you would do 24K. And then in week 4, you would jump back down to 20 kilometers to have a recovery week. Then when you went into week 5, you would jump back up to 24 kilometers and progress using the 10% rule from there. There's a heap of benefits to this program, and the main one is that there is a balance between building and recovery. It provides a sustainable place for you to be able to progress long term because you're not just pounding your body without any adequate rest. And it works for beginners and advanced runners because fundamentally the principles of progression and rest apply to everyone. And this this is actually the model I use with most of my clients. There is only really one negative from this model, and that is that it could get slightly complicated if not explained correct. Once a client or you, for example, would know that they are building for 3 weeks, they are recovering from 1 week, they can embed that into their training cycle and their thought process, and it suddenly becomes less of an issue. And without being too biased, I really do think this is a sweet spot between all of the models. It gives you enough time to be able to progress, but also looks after you from a programming standpoint and doesn't just rely on you being able to auto-regulate how tired you are. For example, someone like me, I will keep training until something breaks. So I need that, right? You are having a rest week, and this is why you're going to stick to that rule now. So then, that's the 3 main models for progressing your running mileage, which is probably the biggest indicator in your ability to be a good runner. But which one is perfect for you? If you're just starting out from very little running, the 10% rule will probably work pretty easily for you, and you'll be able to follow it well for your first stint into running. If you're always finding yourself getting injured because you're progressing too quick, the Jack Daniels model is a really good option for you because it gives you time to solidify your performance before you then progress up. But if you really want the long-term sustainable changes, whilst also building in that progression and recovery, I really do think the 3-to-1 build cycle model is the best one and the one that you should probably apply to your training. And of course, the best model is actually the one that works for you and the one that you can stick to without getting injured, burnt out, and the one that you enjoy. So there you have it. There is 3 main models for progressing your running mileage so that you can run better in your races. You can get that personal best. Remember, mileage is important and is probably the most powerful metric in your progress with running, but it can also massively hinder your progress if not managed correctly. Make sure you build it up slowly over time, you factor in recovery, and at the end of the day, do what makes you happy. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe because I give out tons of running advice from someone who's been in running a couple years now and started from absolutely zero, running a 49-minute 5K and being a muscle-bound idiot. See you in the next one.